All right, go ahead and open your Bible to Genesis 18. Genesis 18. Before we jump in our story tonight, I'd like to let you share for a minute. I want you to think about a time in your life that your faith has caused you to go against the grain. When has been a time in your life where your faith has caused you to kind of go against the flow, go against what the majority is doing? When is the time where you've had to experience that, or a situation that you've been put in which that was either tested or you had to stand alone? Let's start with one. Yeah, start with one. Homeschooling? Okay. 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 All right. So making that decision for your family, everyone else in your family was like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? And it was not a popular decision? Okay. All right. Yep. Charlie? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and having to take a stand in such a lopsided position.
Or point out that, I'm sorry, sir, that is a theory, that is not cold hard facts. It is a theory, and that's not it.
Mm-hmm.
And emphasize the fact that yes, it's a theory, yes, you have to teach it, but I'm not doing it.
Who else?
Mine's along that lines. Every year I have to teach evolution, but I always let them know up front. I have to teach it, but I don't have to make you believe it. And I'm allowed to give arguments on the other side without preaching to them. And I have a few that argue with me, but not too many. And I hate that unit. They know I hate that unit with a passion. The rest of biology, I don't have a problem.
Patty, what about you?
When I was working for State Farm agent, she wanted me to do things that I thought were wrong, and I would not do them. And I told her that. And I expected to get fired, but I didn't. That it kind of, I mean, it happened several times. And that's hard when you're working and your boss is asking you to do things that you know that you're not going to do
Mm-hmm.
because you don't believe that's the ethical thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and we all know being Christians puts us in a minority. But there are times like that, whether it's in family or at school or at work, where we are put in situations to where we have to take that stand. We have to take that stand, and where our Christian faith shows very clearly that we are going an opposite way in which others in the world are flowing. And so tonight, what I'd like us to do is I'd like us to take a look at this story and hopefully be encouraged for those times that we have to face such things, that we will remember that we stand strong for a reason, and we will remember that God does, well, He's really done some of His greatest work with small numbers. He really has. Genesis chapter 18, God has visited Abraham, and He has told him, okay, well, the child is coming. The child is coming. And so He gives them this promise, and after this promise, it goes into a dark section of the story. And I wanted us to pick it up, Genesis chapter 18. I want us to pick it up in verse 16. This is right after he shows up. Abraham hosts him. He says, "You're going to have the kid." Sarah laughs. She said, "I didn't laugh." He goes, "I heard you. Come on." I heard you. And then right after this, I want us to pick it up in verse 16. Then the men set out from there, and they looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them and set them on their way. The Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have chosen him, that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him." Then the Lord said, "Because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me. And if not, I will know." So the men turned from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. So God says, "Look, I'm going to bring my blessing to Abraham." He's already called Abraham. He's already made promises to him, and God's basically said, "I am opening so much for Abraham that I should just go ahead and open this as well. That I should open his eyes and let him know what I'm about to do." And so he says, "Look, I'm going down because the outcry for the sin in these places has been loud. It's been loud." And it maybe it's just because it was Old Testament stuff, but it really struck my heart as I was studying this week and thinking about these things. Sidebar, tangent. I think about how many prayers that we lift up for our nation, and we just think about, God, we really need you to turn things around. And I'm sure, like myself, there's probably a few of us that have prayed for revival and faith. And yet I look over and over and over in the biblical account, whenever God takes care of a nation, he sends another nation to come in and do some damage. He brings some pain. He brings some stinging. And so God says, "Look, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to check, because I've heard that these towns deserve some stinging. And I'm going to go check if it's true." And so he sends his delegates, himself, and Abraham stays there with him. Abraham stays with God. He stands there with him. So God has just let him in on something, and Abraham kind of, okay, this is big, but it's also, I've been privy to something now that's kind of devastating. And it says in verse 23, Abraham drew near and said, "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" I mean, Abraham knows what goes on in these towns. But he asks the Lord a question: Are you really going to just wipe them out? I mean, are you really just going to, everyone that's there, just by proximity, that they're going to get it? Is that, I mean, I want to understand your plans. And he says in verse 24, "So suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it?" Verse 25, "Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just?" And the Lord said, "Well, if I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I'll spare the whole place for their sake." Isn't it funny when we are bargaining with God and forget that he holds all the cards? He kind of knows what's coming next. He kind of knows how the deck is stacked. And Abraham says, "Well, Lord, yeah, I know you've called me and I'm following you in faith and trying to understand your ways, but this one's kind of hard to swallow. Is this really the direction we're going to go? I mean, what if we find 50? Now, you know how this story continues, right? God says, okay, fine, I'll spare it for 50. Oh, that was too quick. Should have asked for less. Right? You know Abraham, the position he's in, when you think what you're asking for is a big ask, and God goes, done. That was like nothing to you. I mean, I really should have asked for something. I prayed little, and you answered little. And so Abraham goes through, and he says, okay, well, what, 45? Done. Okay, don't think, I'm out over my skis, but 40? You bet, 40. Well, since we're going in that direction, how about 30? Sure, 30. Now, you can imagine at some point in this bargaining, Abraham looking over his shoulder, looking down at Sodom and Gomorrah, going, yeah, I know I started this game, but I don't know if 30 is going to cut it. 20? Can I get 20? Can we save it for 20? Yeah, I'll save it for 20. Oh, God knows something, doesn't he? All right, look, Lord, again, I don't want to press upon your mercy, but what if there's 10? 10 righteous people. Will 10 righteous people in that city cause you to spare the whole thing? You know my favorite part of this whole bargaining encounter? No, that's not it. A favorite part of this whole bargaining encounter, once he gets to 10, who leaves? God leaves. Yeah, God's mercy does not cause him. He'd stay there all day. You want mercy? Here, have some mercy. You want blessings? Have some blessing. That speaks so much to God's character, does it not? It should scream loud and clear. God has to remove himself from the conversation just for the mercy to stop flowing. Because Abraham's just like, I'll take a little bit more mercy. You got it. Oh, Lord, that may not be enough mercy. I'm going to need a little bit more mercy. You got it. Okay, God, I know I've asked for mercy, but maybe just a little more mercy. It's all yours. Isn't that a great picture of God? I love that. God says, oh, okay, all right. You got your 10. I'm going to go now. I'm going to go now. We're done. This is done, Abraham. I've got plans. Okay, 10. 10, all right, 10, right? None of your kids stayed in here tonight, which I appreciate. We know what the town is called. We know what's going on there. And, well, Church, here's some encouragement. God agrees to spare the city of Sodom if he finds 10 righteous. And doesn't it just blow your mind that people have a problem with God? Because how could he judge so many? What we have to remind others and what we have to remember ourselves is the many are wicked. The many are wicked. How could God destroy this much or this many? The many are wicked. They deserve it. People cry out today, how could a good God cause tragedy? A good God cause tragedy? The fact that he spares anyone shows that he's good. God is merciful. God is merciful, and he goes to great lengths to spare the righteous. The point is not looking and shaking a fist. The answer is not to shake a fist at the Creator and say, how could you be this way? How could you make me this way? The proper response is always thankfulness for the mercy that he shows us. He is merciful, and it is amazing in these stories how far he will go to save a small number. You remember the flood? How many? I mean, we're just talking a few chapters back. He destroys his creation, and he's upset with himself. He's mad at himself for making us. I mean them, but us, humanity. That was a bad idea. I give them life. I bless them with everything. And all they do is go their own way. I guess that's the problem with freedom, isn't it? The problem with freedom is people use it. Yeah. I mean, in the flood, he spared one family. One family. So when we think about God, when you are trying to explain God to a non-believer, the moral of the story, or the whole point of the story, is not how dare God destroy the wicked, but how good is God to go to such lengths to spare the righteous. That's who we serve. That's who we serve. That's who deserves our honor and respect. I want us to pick it up, and I want us to read chapter 19. Genesis chapter 19. 1 through 11. 1 through 11. Matt's got 1 through 11. And Ben's going 12 through 22. And Tony's going 23 through the end of 29. We are reading chapter 19, 1 through 29.
Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, as Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down at his face to the ground. And he said, Now behold, my lords, please turn aside into your servant's house, and spend the night, and wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go on your way. They said, however, No, we shall spend the night in the square. Yet he urged them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he prepared a feast for them, and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, both young and old, all the people from every quarter. And they called to Lot and said, Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, and we have relations with them. But Lot went out to them at the doorway and shut the door behind him. He said, Please, my brothers, do not act wickedly. Now behold, I have two daughters who have not yet had relations with a man. Please let me bring them out to you, and do to them whatever you like. Only do nothing to these men, inasmuch as they have come under the shelter of my roof. But they said, Stand aside. Furthermore, they said, This one came in as an alien, and already he is acting like a judge. Now we will treat you worse than them. So they pressed hard against Lot and came near to break the door. But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. They struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves trying to find the doorway.
Then the men said to Lot, Have you anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place, for we are about to destroy this place. Because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be just. As morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, Up, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. But he lingered, so the men seized him, and his wife and his two daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him. And they brought him out and set him outside the city. And as they brought him out, one said, Escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away. And Lot said to them, Oh no, my lord, behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life. But I cannot escape to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and die.
Yeah.
Behold, the city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved. He said to him, Behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Escape there quickly, for I can do nothing until you arrive there. Therefore the name of the city is called Zoar.
The sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. And he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley. And he looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived.
4. 4 are spared. 4 are spared, and 1 doesn't even make the trip out. One doesn't even make the trip out. We cry out for justice, but the only one who's qualified and the only one that brings justice his way. This is fantastic conversation to have with non-believers. The things wrong in this world? Absolutely. Great. Has anyone been able to fix them? Nope. That's right. But we know the one who's going to fix them. But it's not going to be a partial fixing. It's not going to be just a little tidying up. God doesn't just tidy up, right? He fixes. He cures. He makes whole. He makes whole. And he's promised us when Jesus returns, he'll bring complete justice. He will set things right. He will set things right. And it is just, God goes to such great lengths to spare the few. He goes to great lengths. Now, whatever your beliefs or whatever your thoughts or whatever your ideas of how big, how crowded heaven's going to be, the mind-blowing thing is I've seen what God has done in the past, what lengths he has gone through to spare the few. The number becomes much less important than the God who is willing to act on our behalf. That's humbling. That's love. That's mercy. That is powerful. So when you're talking to someone and they agree with you that this world is not just, that this world is filled with evil, it needs to be cleansed, it needs to be spared, God has offered it. God has given it. God has said, here's the way out. Here's the way out because justice is coming. Yeah.
I think verse 16 just kind of jumped out at me. God, they told him exactly what's going to happen and what they're going to do, and they know the wickedness of where they're at, but they lingered. And it said that God, the men, seized them by the hands and took them out of the city. I mean, it's like, okay, let's go. And then they call it a mercy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I think of times where, me personally, I'm sure we all can, where we kind of lingered in a place maybe where we were comfortable and didn't belong. Not necessarily wrong, but maybe we were at a job or we were in just somewhere where we, we knew God was calling us out. We're like uncomfortable and afraid of what's ahead. And where are we going? What's our next destination? Because that's even something like, well, what's, where do I go from here? But God just sometimes is just very abrupt. And just takes us by the hand and just pulls us out of it. And that may seem harsh or scary at times, but here it's called mercy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and to trust his mercy, because how many times in our life, just like she's talking about, where the door that we were not ready to be shut was shut for us. Or a door open we didn't think we were prepared for, and he ushered us through it. And really, church, when we think about it, what we face, that's the door God's opening at that moment. And we may be ushered through at a pace we are not comfortable with, but that is God's mercy. That is God's mercy. Tony? Yeah. True. Yeah, he had the choice. He had the choice, Tony.
So the phrase, "Don't mistake my kindness for weakness," comes to mind. When we think about the mercy of God, we shouldn't mistake mercy for acceptance. And I think so a lot of times we do.
Yeah.
We think because he's allowed us to get away with whatever, or get by our forgiveness for whatever, we just think, okay, he's fine with that, and that's not the case. You were talking about
Yeah. All right, so next week we will jump into the New Testament and see what Jesus has to say about these situations. But just remember that. Remember that. It's such a, sometimes it's such a thing that Christians fear to wear. This idea that God is bringing judgment, this idea that God could somehow be not a loving God, because how can you believe in judgment of everyone if God is so full of love? Well, yeah, you can't have his love without his justice. He's complete. He's completer than we are, Kevin.